Kawasaki 650 parallel twin. An engine that Kawasaki deems so versatile that they have plonked it in 3 very different styles of motorcycles. A naked, that's the Kawasaki Z650, a sports tourer, that's the Ninja 650, and an adventure tourer, that's the Versys 650. 3 very different styles of motorcycles for 3 very different styles of riders, and that's exactly what we have here. Me, personally, I prefer sport riding, so I chose the Ninja 650. Suvrat likes the agility and the appeal of a naked, so he chose the Z650. And well, Karan, before he had a choice, we plonked him on the Versys 650. Welcome to the Evo India channel, and today we're going to break down the Kawasaki 650 range for you. But before we do that, share this video, like this video, and comment down below which one of these motorcycles you want in your garage. The Z650, the Ninja 650 and the Versys 650 are powered by the same liquid-cooled 649cc parallel twin, and the Z and the Ninja have it in an identical state of tune and both make 67 bhp at 8000 rpm and 64 Nm of torque at 6700 rpm. The Versys, however, is in a different state of tune and makes slightly less power and torque at 65.7 bhp at 8500 rpm and 61 Nm of torque at 7000 rpm. So basically, with the same engine at center stage, let's take a closer look at exactly how different these bikes are.
Now let's start with the Z650. Now this motorcycle, it's based on Kawasaki's Sugomi design language, and that's what makes it look so sporty and so aggressive. We saw this design language on the Z1000 a few years ago, and later it trickled down to the rest of the Z range. Now, every time I look at this bike, I just feel like the bike is shouting at me to go fast, and that's just the character of this motorcycle. There are sharp cuts and creases from any angle you look at it. I especially like the headlamp design. The headlamp cowl is very sharp, and the LED headlamps in fact illuminate the road pretty well. I don't like LED headlamps a lot. I prefer halogen headlamps because they work the best in Indian conditions, but the LED units on the Z650 are actually very good. Now in terms of ergonomics, the Kawasaki Z650 is very well judged. Unlike the Ninja, it's not very aggressive and it's not too upright like the Versys either. The riding position, it's very comfortable. The handlebar is upright. The foot pegs are not that rear set, so you're seated comfortably most of the time. I've been riding in the city around Pune in traffic in the past few days, and I've been comfortable as far as the riding position is concerned. Now the Ninja and the Z650 get the same digital instrument cluster. It packs a lot of information. So you have your tachometer, your speedometer, you have your gear shift indicator, there are 2 trip meters and odometer, and it also shows distance to empty. That aside, you can also pair your smartphone to the screen using the Kawasaki Rideology app. In terms of functionality though, the Rideology app is not all that great because it doesn't show turn-by-turn navigation on the screen. Now let's talk about chassis. So just like the Ninja, the Z650 is also based on a steel trolley frame, and it's about 5 kg lighter. And in fact, it's about 25 odd kgs lighter than the Versys 650. But then again, there's a lot less mass on the Z, and it just looks lean and mean, and that's how I like it. Now that aside, the Ninja and the Z650 are identical in terms of specs. Both get dual 300mm discs up front. There's a 41mm telescopic fork. You have dual channel ABS, and even the seat height is identical at 790mm, and so is the ground clearance at 130mm. The ride quality on the Z650 is definitely the stiffest of the lot. You do feel the small ripples and undulations in the road, and the ride is just busy at slow speeds. But then again, when you go faster, that's when the Z650 feels more planted and feels more confident. You also have to be considerate of its low 130mm ground clearance. You can't just blindly attack any kind of surfaces that you see, unlike you can do on the Versys 650. You have to carefully negotiate your way through bad road and potholes. In terms of handling, the Z650 is a very sweet motorcycle. It loves to be flung around corners, and it's very agile. In fact, even at slow city speeds, its well-balanced chassis made me feel like I was riding a motorcycle that was much smaller. In fact, I thought I was riding a 250cc motorcycle. It feels like that in a city. the Z650 has a parallel twin engine. It makes 67 bhp, 64 Newton meters of torque, and that's all that you really need. Every time you twist your wrist, there's an alarming reaction from the motorcycle. It just wants to go fast. On the highways and in the mountains, around corners, you will have a blast. It can hit triple-digit speeds very easily. And even in the city, it's surprisingly easy to ride. This engine, it's very tractable. The gear ratios are very tall. And what that means is you can go as low as 3000 RPM in the third gear and pull all the way to 130, 140 kilometers an hour without the engine feeling stressed. I definitely think that this can be your first big bike if you like naked street fighters.
The Ninja 650 with its BS6 update has received an overhaul in its styling and design as well, and Kawasaki has brought it in line with its current lineup of faired bikes. The Ninja 650 now looks menacing with its sharp cuts and creases all across the fairing, and you definitely mistake it for something like the ZX6R or even the bigger Ninja 1000. The Ninja 650 now gets LED headlamps up front that do a decent job of illuminating the road ahead of you, and the rear tail lamp is made up of multiple LED lights that form an X, unlike the Z that's found on the Z650. Despite being a 650, it looks like a proper superbike, and just looking at it, you're reminded of the times when you would put up a poster of a superbike on the wall and just stare at it. And this KRT livery definitely enhances that emotion further. So the Ninja 650 and the Z650 share more than just an engine. At the center of the fairing, right above the clip-ons, is the same 4.3-inch color TFT display that Subrat spoke about. Apart from that, it also uses the same steel trolley frame and is suspended on the same 41mm telescopic KYBs. It also uses the same brake setup, but unlike the Z, which gets a wider, flatter handlebar, the Ninja gets clip-ons that are lower and slightly away from you, but not uncomfortably slow. When you're on the bike, you aren't as leaned over as you would be on a super sport, say something like the ZX6R. Despite all the similarities, Kawasaki has done a great job of differentiating the Z from the Ninja. The suspension of the Ninja is on the softer side, and it does a great job of soaking up imperfections and undulations when you're pottering about at city speeds. But the downside of that is, it doesn't take a big bump or an undulation to completely unsettle the bike when you're riding it at speed, and that is not helped by the low 130mm ground clearance. The Ninja 650 is also not as narrow as the Z650, which means filtering the traffic is slightly cumbersome because of its wide fairing mounted mirrors. That being said, the Ninja continues to be a great handler worthy of its Ninja title. It will gladly tip into a corner and hold the line and do exactly as instructed. And due to its tractable motor, you don't even need to work the gearbox too much to get good drive out of the corner. The added fairing implies that you can consistently cruise at higher speeds and reach your destination more relaxed than you would if you were to take the Z. I am 5'10" and there was minimal buffeting around my helmet when I was sitting in the regular riding position, nothing that tucking in didn't solve. Speaking of cruising, the motor has enough poke to comfortably do 120 km/h all day long while still having plenty of power left to make quick overtakes without having to downshift. And the seat is roomy enough and just the right amount of firm to keep your bottom well cushioned and comfortable for a long day in the saddle. So my only gripe with the Ninja 650 are the brakes and the tires. The brakes have sharp initial bite but lack the feedback after that required for confidence for braking hard. And the ABS also kicks in abruptly at times. And speaking of the tires, the Ninja 650 uses Dunlop Road Sport Sportmax 2 tires, which offer decent grip in dry conditions, but the second it becomes wet or there's gravel or slush on the road, the grip reduces drastically, reducing confidence alike. So I would definitely recommend a change of tires, which would not only improve grip in all conditions, but would definitely improve braking performance as well. So, to sum up the Ninja 650, it's a comfortable sports tourer that definitely does justice to both the sport bit and the touring bit.
Now there's no getting away from the fact that the Versys is the relative ugly duckling of the bunch here. While the Z has its edginess and the Ninja has all of that drama and the sexy KRT livery, the Versys, at least when you look at it from the front, looks a little bit incomplete. Now that said, it does still have its fair share of cuts, swoops and flair. I particularly like how that offset rear monoshock looks, and that
coupled with this candy lime paint and the tall 840mm seat height, means that people do stop and take notice when you are riding the Versys. Now if you look around the Versys, you will notice that it is starting to show its age. The headlamp unit is halogen, not all LED like we have on the other two bikes here, and even this instrument cluster is not a TFT screen. And while I personally prefer this analog rev needle, there's no denying the functionality that you get from those TFT screens, and it is something that we've come to expect at this price range. But right under that power digital instrument cluster is one of the best features of the Versys. These are the 41mm upside down forks from Showa. These are fully adjustable units and they offer 150mm of travel. That offset monoshock at the rear, it offers 145mm of travel. At the rear here, we also have disc brakes that are 250mm, larger than the ones that you have on the other two bikes here, while the disc in the front at 300mm is the same as the other two. And now let's talk about what the Versys is like to ride. Well, the minute you get onto this saddle, it feels like you can do hundreds and hundreds of kilometers without breaking a sweat. And this is down to three major things: the ergonomics, the powertrain, and the suspension. Let's tackle each of them one by one. Now the seat here is wide, it is cushioned very well for the rider. Even for the pillion, there's enough cushioning and enough room for them to sit comfortably even on relatively longer journeys. The handlebars, they are tall and the foot pegs are not too far rear set. So you sit fairly upright, and that means you're sitting in a very comfortable position, which is a big advantage if you're planning to use this adventure tourer as an adventure tourer. Now another factor contributing to comfort while you're actually on the move is this windscreen. It is adjustable, so you can get it actually pretty high up, and when you do get it high up, it does take up quite a bit of the buffeting that you get from the air when you are at triple digit speeds or at a highway cruise. And those triple digit speeds are super easy to get to thanks to this 649cc gem of an engine. It makes 65 bhp and 61 Nm of torque, which means it is slightly down on both power and torque compared to the other two that we have here. But is there an actual difference in terms of performance? Well, there is a little bit of a difference in terms of performance, but unless you're riding these three back to back, you won't really notice it too much. You can do a highway cruise in 6th gear all day long, and all it takes is a twist of the throttle to get an overtake done or to just shoot into the distance if you need to. Now this engine is also very tractable, and this is especially noticeable when you are riding the Versys in the city. You can pretty much get onto 2nd gear as soon as you get rolling. Even at speeds below 20 kmph, if you just roll onto the throttle in 2nd gear, the Versys picks up pace without any judder or any hesitation. So while the engine itself is quite refined even at low speeds, even at high speeds, but that is also helped by the fact that you have rubber grips here, and the foot pegs themselves are coated in rubber, so you're pretty much vibe free no matter the speeds. And again, that is a great factor if you are planning to take the Versys for longer journeys. Now this gearbox is a 6-speed unit, and while it isn't the best in the business, it does get the job done. Sure, you do hit neutral at times while shifting from 1st to 2nd. It is a bit clunky and not the best thing to play with, but it isn't going to give you any trouble even on longer journeys. Now another small drawback of the Versys is that at 218 kgs, this is not what you'd call a light motorcycle. You can certainly feel that weight when you're trying to park it at very low speeds, or when you're sneaking through traffic, or you're stuck in a traffic jam. The Versys feels a little cumbersome in those areas, and that heavy clutch that we spoke about there does not help things in those situations either. That said, the weight of the Versys is actually really well judged when you start to move. In corners, you can barely feel that weight, and the Versys sort of shrinks itself around you when you do get going. And once you do get going, the suspension is sure to put a smile onto your face. It is very comfortable. Over bad patches, you can barely feel it. The Versys feels like it can take just more and more battering every time you put it through a rough patch of road. Speed breakers are not a problem at all. The worst of potholes will not bother the Versys, and it still feels very planted when you're pushing it through the corners. The suspension is actually a big factor in making the Versys feel very easy to ride at high speeds. Now while this isn't a full-blown ADV, the 17-inch tires should give that away pretty easily. You can still get away with taking the Versys on off-road trails, and that is no thanks to the 170mm ground clearance. Now, all of this makes the Versys a very compelling package. Okay, it might not win a beauty contest, but it has great long-range capabilities, no thanks to a 21-litre fuel tank. It's got a solid punch from that engine. You can really have fun, especially at the top end. That shriek from the 649cc engine is something to behold. And aside from that, it also has the perfect suspension and ground clearance for our conditions. At just over rupees 7 lakh, the Versys is more expensive than the other two, and while this isn't a comparison test per se, I can tell you that the Versys, it justifies that increase in price with a lot more versatility.
So the point of the matter is this: what are you looking for from your bike? Do you want something that is not so committed, something that can handle the daily commute and still get you to a spirited weekend ride? Or do you want something that is slightly more committed, gives you proper superbike feels but not at the cost of comfort, and can still take you great lengths in great comfort? Or at the other end of the spectrum, do you want something that is versatile enough to handle what India has to offer in terms of road conditions? The point is this: whatever you're looking for, Kawasaki has something for you in the 650 range to suit your taste. And at the price points they are offered at, that is rupees 6.24 lakh for the Z650, rupees 6.61 lakh for the Ninja 650, and rupees 7.15 lakh for the Versys 650, they make for great stepping stones for someone who's looking to upgrade from a 300cc bike and is not looking for overwhelming amounts of power. So what's your choice? The Z650, the Ninja 650, or the Versys 650? Do let us know in the comments down below. Like and share this video and subscribe to the Evo India channel for more content like this.
Subscribe to the Evo India channel and hit the bell icon to keep pace with the thrill of driving.